Hi and welcome to the Booklab. I'm Bjorn and it's that time of the month when we look at the most exciting releases this time for December. And I don't know what's going on this month, but there is a common theme going through all these books. I have 5 books for you and all of them touch on religious themes or tradition, but all from a very different angle. We have books about sin versus the neurology. We have books about the powerful stories that shaped Western thought, the evolution of the idea of Christ, and books about upkeeping tradition. And if that's not interesting to you, don't worry, Booklab has got your back, because we also have books about the all too human wish to remain innocent and ignorant. So buckle up, here are the December releases. Let's go. I have 5 books for you this month and December is looking really good, but we're going to start off with one book that I missed from December. It was out on November 19th. It's 576 pages and it's Jordan Peterson's We Who Wrestle with God. In We Who Wrestle with God, Dr. Peterson guides us through the ancient foundational stories of the Western world. In riveting detail, he analyzes the biblical accounts of rebellion, sacrifice, suffering, and triumph that stabilize, inspire, and unite us culturally and psychologically. Adam and Eve and the fall of mankind, the resentful and ultimately murderous war between Cain and Abel, the cataclysmic flood of Noah, the spectacular collapse of the Tower of Babel, Abraham's terrible adventure, and the epic of Moses and the Israelites. I myself grew up in a very non-religious, secular home. Sweden is a very secular country, so I've had very little natural exposure to these classic myths. But as I've grown up, and especially now, I am so fascinated with the interpretations of these ancient stories. There must just be something to them that allows them to live on for such a long time. What could these stories possibly mean? What force wrote and assembled them over the long centuries? How did they bring our spirits and world together and point us in the same direction? It's time for us to understand such things scientifically and spiritually, to become conscious of the structure of our souls, our societies, and see ourselves and others as if it was for the first time. I myself have 2 stories that I just can't get enough of, and it's Adam and Eve and different interpretations of that. I think Ishmael is a book that had an interesting interpretation of that, and also the story of Cain and Abel. Abraham as well, because, I didn't bring the book here, but earlier, I think it was last year or at the beginning of this year, I read Kierkegaard's book, Fear and Trembling, that is just about Abraham's faith in God as he traveled to sacrifice his own son, and what that means. Kierkegaard talks about it as the ultimate sacrifice, and Abraham as the knight of faith. Super interesting story, and you can see the full review of that book. I'll put a link in the description below. So this book might be very interesting, and I've read some of his books before. I don't agree with everything this person has to say. I actually read this one before I knew who Jordan Peterson was and the controversies around him, and I really enjoyed the 12 Rules for Life, probably his most famous work. I also read Maps of Meaning, which sounds more similar to this one. This is a quite complicated book about the architecture of belief, but it's a powerful book. And the reason why I put this book on the list is probably because Jordan Peterson's Bible series, he has a biblical series where he talks about the stories in the Bible on YouTube, and it's one of the most powerful video series on YouTube. So regardless if you like his political stuff or not, that lecture series is well worth your time. I put a link to that also in the description below. But let's go to the next book. 7 Deadly Sins, The Biology of Being Human, by Guy Leschziner, butchering names, tradition on the channel, 384 pages. 7 Deadly Sins will explore the underlying nature of the 7 deadly sins, their neuroscientific and psychological basis, and their origin in our genes. Gluttony, pride, sloth, envy, lust, anger. These are the 7 deadly sins, the vices of humankind that define immorality. But do these really represent moral failings? Or are they just simply important and useful biological functions that humans need to survive? So basically the theme of this book is is the human brain wired for sin? Seven Deadly Sins dares to turn much of what society thinks about morality on its head. Leschziner takes the readers on a journey through the seven deadly sins as he looks at their neuroscientific and biological basis, their origin in our genes, and crucially, how certain medical disorders may give rise to them. He introduces us to patients whose physical and psychological conditions have given rise to behaviors that have for centuries been labeled as sin, and how these behaviors might actually be evolutionary imperatives that preserve the tribe and ensure the well-being of our society. Very interesting take, very interesting topic. I have not heard about a book like this before, so yeah, made it to the list. Book number 3, Heretic, The Many Lives and Deaths of Jesus Christ by Catherine Nixey, out on December 3rd, 383 pages. A biography of the many diverse versions of Jesus who thrived in the early Christian tradition and how they were lost until one true Christ survived. Contrary to the teachings of the church today, in the first several centuries of Christianity's existence, there was no consensus of who Jesus was and why he mattered. Instead, there were many different Christs. One of them had a twin brother that traveled with him to India, for instance. Maybe that was Ashton Kutcher. He has a twin brother and he was in India at one point, I think. Another version of Jesus consorted with dragons. Maybe that's Joe Rogan. One particularly terrifying Christ scorned his parents and killed those who opposed him. So this is maybe a very niche book, but it sounds quite interesting, looking for the origin of the person that we see as Christ today and different variations and interpretations of his life. I don't know much about the credibility of the author, but it just sounds like an interesting book. I have never heard anyone write on this topic before. There's probably a lot of it, but it just sounds like an accessible and interesting book to read. The 4th book is Custodians of Wonder. Ancient customs, profound traditions, and the last people keeping them alive by Eliot Stein. This book is 336 pages and it's out on December 10th. Quote, a vivid look at 10 astonishing people who are maintaining some of the world's oldest and rarest cultural traditions. The author, Eliot Stein, he has been traveling the world. He has been meeting up with people who keep up old, half-forgotten traditions and rites and try to tell the story about why upkeeping tradition matters. Climbing through Peru's southern highlands, he uncovers the last Inca bridge master who rebuilds a grass-woven bridge every year from the fabled Inca road system. He befriends a British beekeeper who maintains a very cute tradition of bringing the bees the news of the day every day. This sounds like a cute book about the small yet important aspects of life. Let me know in the comments if your culture, your society, or your community has any interesting traditions or rites that more people should know about. I would love to hear about that. This sounds like just a sweet book. And we're already reaching the end, and this is book number 5, Ignorance and Bliss on Wanting Not to Know. It's by Lilla. It's out on December 16th. It's 256 pages. A dazzling exploration of our wish to remain innocent and ignorant and its consequences. Quote, Aristotle claimed that all human beings want to know. Our own experience proves that all human beings also want not to know. Today, centuries after the Enlightenment, mesmerized crowds still follow preposterous prophets, irrational rumors triggers fanatical acts, and magical thinking crowds out common sense and expertise. Why is this? Where does this will to ignorance come from? And how does it continue to shape our lives? This initial introduction to the book reminds me a bit of a book that I read a while back called The Death of Expertise, The Campaign Against Established Knowledge and Why It Matters by Tom Nichols. Full review, of course, provided in a link below. In Ignorance and Bliss, the acclaimed essayist and historian of ideas Lilla offers an absorbing psychological diagnosis of the human will not to know. With erudition and brio, I don't know what those words means actually, I'm just Swede. Lilla ranges from the book of Genesis, see, religious thread through all these books, and Plato's dialogues to Sufis, parables, and Sigmund Freud, revealing the paradoxes of hiding truths from ourselves. And you can hear it right here. It's philosophy, it's psychology, it's right up our alley. He also exposes the fantasies this impulse lead us to entertain, the illusions that the ecstasies of prophets, mythics, and holy fools offers access to esoteric truths, the illusions of children's lamb-like innocence, and the nostalgic illusion of recapturing the glories of vanished and allegedly purer civilizations. That's some tricky language that this author uses. I don't know if that tells us anything about the book. We want to know, we want not to know. We accept truth, we resist truth. Back and forth, the mind shuttles, playing badminton with itself. But it doesn't feel like a game, it feels like our lives are at stake. And they are. I don't know, this sounds really interesting to me. Those were the 5 books. I hope you enjoyed it. If you... We're going to go into pick of the month, of course, but before that I want to ask you to like and subscribe. It helps me grow the channel and reach more people, and that's just like the metric of YouTube that is important. So if you do that, I appreciate it. I put up videos every week and do this breakdown every month. So just chime in again if you didn't find any books that you like this time, or look at the other monthly breakdowns. I'm sure you will find something to read during this holiday season. Pick of the month. I never prepare for this. I just do this on a whim. Let me look through the list again. Okay, I will pick Ignorance and Bliss. It stood out to me. I want to read it. I'm very interested in self-delusion. I think it's very interesting. And I also think it's an interesting time of polarization that we live through, where there's very strong opinions for and against different things, and an ability to accept that there might be some grain of truth in both camps. So I'll pick that book, but I'm gonna pick one for November as well, because actually at the top of the list is also We Who Wrestle with God. I really want to read that book. I love this old ancient story. I know that book came out in November, but I'm gonna pick it anyway as a second pick. I'm gonna read that one. So I'm going to see if they have it on Audible, and maybe I'll enjoy that, maybe early next year. Let me know in the comments which one of these books interested you the most. I would love to hear that. So, and if you haven't said hi, say who you are, what country you're from, if you're tuning in for the first time, or if you've been with the channel for a while. I love to interact with you guys. Next week I will have a review up of Nate Silver's book called On the Edge, about the art of risk-taking, the art of risking everything. Interesting book about people who are ready to take huge risk and what we can learn from them. So tune in next week. Until then, happy reading. Björn out. Cheers.